There is an object hidden in the sky. Our predecessors studied its appearances. Like a vast clockwork apparatus, it appeared on a fixed timeline and disappeared whole civilizations. They have left us records of this invisible eye in the sky and how they hid underground from its face. They feared the return of the phoenix. Hey. Let's get that audio check done real quick. Make sure you guys can hear me loud and clear. Hello, Victoria. First hi Jace I've seen tonight. Sounds good. Thank you, Lacey. George Abdelnour. All right. We have a rather serious video presentation. I finished reading this book. I believe that you can thank errant extraordinaire, Archaix veteran, Donna Abelman. I could be wrong. So many people have sent me books, but she normally focuses on chronological books when she sends them to me. I believe this was from her. This is by an academic named Susan Thompson. In the description box, I gave you her information. I was not prepared for what I found in this book. It literally covers 4,500 years of history in chronological order, year by year, who said what and what they said. Now, this may not look like a lot, but you have to understand, each individual cited in this book made conclusions after a lifetime of research. You can't dismiss that lightly. So when I'm going to give you over 150 data points out of this book in chronological order, and they're going to paint for you a picture. And the picture that we're going to end with is actually bifurcated. One is that humans are basically very smart in studying rocks, fossils, terrain, geography. We pretty much figured out what happened in the ancient world. At the same time, another body of scientists got together and put out an entirely falsified version of history. I didn't put it in the description box. I didn't even put it in the title. But one of the core takeaways from this video is that going by purely scientific publications and authors throughout history, all the way up to modern times, you're going to find out one of the key 5 takeaways from this presentation is that there's no such thing as dinosaurs. That's just the only free one I'm going to give you. You're going to have to watch the video to get to the rest. We may be going 4 hours tonight. That's why I got straight to it. So when you receive these one-liners from me, you will be reading them. This is so important. It is so important for you to understand I did not put this together and that this came from the research of an academic who was citing only other scientists and naturalists from all time periods up to the 1870s. It is so important for you to understand that you're going to see it on the screen at the same time that I'm reading it to you, and then I'm going to tell you why it's relatively important if that's necessary. I published 2 charts in the community section for you to look at. Those charts do not scratch the surface of what we're going to learn in this video, but they do help give you a visual understanding that the data set that she created, not knowing anything about the Phoenix phenomenon, knowing nothing about the reset chronology that I have documented in Archaix, she had no idea. And yet Her data set perfectly proves the Phoenix resets and the exact years that I've published, just like so many other authors who provided fantastic material without even understanding that the crossover is 100%. They were just studying from totally different vantage points. Like I said, this is a video you're probably going to listen. I know my Archaix veterans are going to get two to three listens out of this video because it's profound what we're going to see. We have been technologically advanced before. We have been very intelligent. We're thinking, reasoning, rational beings who are observing our environment will always come to core conclusions. You have to understand it does not matter if the sky is simulated. It does not matter if you believe that we live in a heliocentric environment, or if you believe in this that the earth is the center of all movement. If you believe we live in a toroidal field at the epicenter on a flat plane amidst two fields going in opposite directions, creating polarity. It doesn't matter if you believe you live in a totally computer matrixed copy of something else, a simulacrum. What you believe about your world doesn't matter. What matters is that the sky has certain programming, and that programming is specifically there to get a very intelligent observer to make conclusions that are in error. I told you from the beginning and the inception of my research in my channel, the sky lies. It lies to us. The programming for curvature and everything, it's in there. It's even in the historical record. There are even citations out of this book where scientists are absolutely baffled because they cannot reconcile what they're looking at, observing, and measuring with the world that they're living in. I told you the sky is a lie, and the only thing real is you. We live in an observer-dependent reality. And that comes with core fundamentals, things that are absolutely true for everybody here, such as dogs are canine, fire burns, sugar is sweet. If you turn out a light, it will be dark. There are core fundamentals in the programming that we can all agree on, and there's no room for disagreement. But then there are perceivable subroutines where, through core subjectivity, we can come up with our own conclusions that are independent of others. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are right and they are wrong. I have shown in Archaix that completely opposite paradigms can be both correct. That's the nature of the field we live in. So let's get into it. Only announcement is Virginia Beach. Oh, that's the only announcement I have. Virginia Beach is the new style Archaix. Listen, guys, Archaix set out in my very first video on simulation theory, which was my second video ever. It was over a year after I had a motorcycle accident that changed my perspective. All that is in the history of my channel. That video, the first that launched Archaix, I made a bunch of promises, and a lot of my Archaix veterans will tell you I've lived up to those promises. I know because you told me in the comment sections. But I made a series of promises about the direction of my channel, and I was going to show you an overwhelming amount of information to demonstrate that we are in a controlled construct, not a real reality. I released 200 and something videos before I upped my game. In Archaix 2.0, The Unveiling, that was the first Archaix 2.0 video. And I did. And I went even deeper into the aspects of the construct. And I showed you guys from the historical record all these cycles and epicycles and patterns and repetitive sequences that show that we cannot live in a real reality based off sequential historical events. We live in a programmed construct that has subroutines embedded in it that we call history. All these patterns. Archaix 2.0 took us to the next level, especially for those who are ready. Unfortunately, a lot of people new to my channel did not go through just the regular core Archaix material before they found my channel, and they started at 2.0. Some of them have been able to keep up, others have not. I'm not moving backwards. But now, with Archaix 3.0, I'm taking it to the next level, and you're going to know exactly what I mean in this video. Also, my meetup is going to be the same way. In Virginia Beach, we're going to the next level. I'm going to show you how you rewrite the core programming of your reality, and you can do it overnight. how you can take negative situations that have been introduced in your life and you can alter their polarity. Use the energy that's already there to create something positive in your life. That's what Virginia Beach is about. So, having said all that, we need to get deep into this data set because this is amazing, and you're going to have some mind-gasms all the way through it because these one-liners are the core conclusion of research men conducted who had access to information, made observations during Phoenix phenomenon episodes afterward or before, and even had access to libraries that we no longer possess. So it's very important to pay attention to what these men who spent their lives coming to these conclusions published. All right, that's my intro. Just to show you real quick, her bibliography is pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages. She has almost as much bibliography as she does text. Very impressed with Susan. She didn't make any conclusions in that book. All she was doing was itemizing the facts. That's all she was doing. Texas hasn't been hot in the past 2 days. It's been kind of weird. It's been 100, 102, heat index 107, 108. But you know what? Antonio Macias, how you pronounce that? I seen you in the chat just now. We gave you a blue wrench. You probably don't even know this. We gave you a blue wrench, but three or four videos went by, and we were going through our moderators, and we seen that you hadn't been in any of those videos, so you're probably busy in life. But just let you know that you were given a blue wrench. If you still want it back, you got to let us know. All right. Yeah, it's pretty nice in here. All right. We'll catch somebody real quick. Oh my God. Chat is moving so fast. All right. Yeah, I need one. There he is. I'm in the StreamYard app. Dawn, if you can, you can give him a blue wrench. He already had it. I can't do it from the StreamYard app. I have to actually go into the YouTube. I'm on streaming software. I can do it after the video. I can't do it now. But if Dawn sees you, Antonio, she can do it. Meanwhile, I need to get on. Antonio Macias, Macias, Dawn. All right. Oh, we're gonna get that misinformation out of here. Get it out of here. I'm excited about this video. That's it. Susan Thompson. Thank you, Shiva Shampoo. Shiva, what are you doing up, man? What are you doing up? It's like, what is it? 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning over there? Antonio, you need to make another comment so Dawn can find you real fast. Tone Deaf, you've been around a long time too, man. A long time. I remember you in my little chats. Tone, you need to speak up, man, if you want to join the club. All right. So, don't hurt yourself, champ. Man, you guys just don't know how many hours a day. In my younger years, I used to stay on that bag. Used to wrap my hands, get my hands and my wrists wrapped real good. I'd go in there until I was just exhausted. All right, let's see. So what I need to do, share my screen. No other way around it. Oh, here we go. Right. Let's see. This is a touch screen. Excellent. Okay. This is the best I can do, guys, with the font size and what I have. Let me know if you can read the very first line, and we'll begin. Just let me know if you can read the very first line. Because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see it, so I need to. Y'all can see me, but I really can't see you. All right, Goju Vibe says yes. Okay. Thank you, Victoria. All right, then. Since y'all can read it, let's go back to it. As soon as I can find it. All right. The first information she shows is out of the Rig Veda. Now, the original writings of the Rig Veda, of course, I agree with this. There's a lot of Vedic scholars agree with this. Those who have studied Sanskrit, they're pretty much on board with the original writings date to about 2000 BC. Those are not the writings that we have. Those are not the surviving writings. We have copies of copies. Now, some of the oldest fragments in the world date to the first millennium BC, but they are not this old. We do not have any copies of the Rig Veda of this age. But what we do have is a massive corpus of commentaries, the Puranic texts and scholarly monographs that break down all the information that you need to basically ascertain that, okay, this is a huge body of literature that lasted the four Vedas, the Atharva Veda, the Rig Veda. I can't remember the name of the other two, but it is generally agreed by all who studied that, yes, these were originally written around 2000 BC. That in itself is very interesting because it's 239 years after the Typhon flood that collapsed the vapor canopy and caused what is known as the biblical flood of Noah. 239 years is plenty of time for a people to begin re-putting back together their culture, re-putting back together the literati, everything. So this is really confirmatory, but we have to understand we're dealing with, when we read the old Sanskrit texts, we're not dealing with the mythological. The oldest writings from India are not full of fantasy. They're highly technical. And what's really interesting is that they are the result of a people who have been observing the sky for a very long time. And what their core conclusions were is that don't get triggered with me, flat earthers. You have to understand the sky is simulated, and it is simulated with a specific intent to deceive you into believing that you're in a heliocentric model. This is why the moon has phases. This is why this curvature is indicative. This is why the sky sim has an obliquity of 23.5 degrees. It's there by design to get you to think that we're spinning on an axis hurling around a star. This is not something modern. A lot of researchers on YouTube and on other platforms are always throwing the accusation out that this whole heliocentric model and that the world as a globe is something new. It is not something new. Our predecessors fell for the same bullshit. It's not something new that was invented in the 1800s. I'm going to show you. It's been known multiple times through history. When a civilization becomes more and more advanced in its optics, able to see and perceive things and do measurements, that's when they buy into the lie. The smarter a people get intellectually, the more ensnared they become in the designs of the construct. The Sanskrit Vedic writings, even Vedic scholars are baffled as to many geographical monikers that are in the Vedas, because it shows these texts were never written in India. There are many things in botany. There are many things in flora, fauna that are mentioned in the ancient Sanskrit writings that literally scream that it was written in a far northern region, circumpolar, and in an alpine region, not by valley dwellers, not like the people of the Tigris-Euphrates, not like the Indus Valley, Indus civilization. No, the ancient Sanskrit is written by a post-reset culture that still maintained a modicum of their previous discoveries before they were reset. They still had some of their sciences intact. They believed after the cataclysm of 2239 BC, the Typhon flood, they believed that they lived on a globe. That's Rig Veda, VAID 108. They also believe the earth circles the sun. Very ancient. These are her first two data points. Very ancient text from a very ancient people who were preserving the science of their predecessors who lived in a pre-cataclysm society. Before their society was reset, they were heliocentrists. Now, this lady who put this together, Susan, never gives us a reason why there's vast periods of time. But you saw the charts. I published the charts for free in the community section and on Twitter. But in her data sets, look at the leap between 2000 and 585 BC. We already know what fills that gap, because the age of the phoenix started in 2239 BC. And 552 years later, a phoenix cycle, it was 1687 BC, collapse of the Heliolithic maritime empire of the Amurru, totally destroyed by the Typhon, the phoenix in 1687 BC. My Archaix veterans know all this. I don't have to give any data on that. I'm not going to. I'm not going into details on phoenix phenomenon because you should know it. If you've been listening to my, put it to you this way. If you're going to venture into Archaix 3.0, I shouldn't have to say any of that. You already know it. So 585 BC is such a curious date. Why? Thales of Miletus predicted the darkening of the sun, and we know it wasn't an eclipse. He said that the sun was going to darken in 2 years. And it occurred just like he said in 583 BC. Remember, I've published all the information about the monument of Yassilikaya, how the sun darkened and it scared the Persians and it scared the Lydians, and they decided to conclude for peace. Not only that, the Delphic oracle was also alarmed, and they realized something new had happened in the world, and they changed their calendar. They started a whole new calendar, starting with year one, the very next year, 582 BC. In Chronicon, I have a lot of records for 583, what happened. It was the Phoenix appeared. So Thales of Miletus predicted the sun darkening. The establishment scientists want you to believe that he predicted an eclipse, but that's not what Herodotus of Halicarnassus said. He said a darkening of the sun. And other naturalists after Herodotus, even like Lucretius and Pliny the Elder, also published that there is an object in the sky that darkens the sun at a fixed time, and that its period is so long that it's already forgotten by the time it returns. So we know we're talking about something other than the moon. Additionally, Herodotus of Halicarnassus, who reported this in 450 BC in his epic work called the Histories, specifically has a section on eclipses and eclipse sciences as known by the Persians, Babylonians, and others, and never once declared that Thales of Miletus was only predicting an eclipse. Yeah, modern academia is full of shit. Something else happened. It's on the Phoenix phenomenon timeline. Now, Thales of Miletus became one of the wise men of Greece. But what is this? What is so amazing about this? She published a data set of all the examples from history that she could find in the university library of when science began to flourish and we came out of dark age periods. That's the whole subject matter of her text. Her text is about scientific breakthroughs for each epoch in time. 585 BC, means Thales of Miletus is the beginning of scientific thought in ancient Greece, because before that it was all the poets and the minstrels, it was the epic writers. Before that, we had 300 years before that, we had Homer, Hesiod, and Theogony. So I'm missing somebody too. There's a third one. 3 great epic writers of the time. Wow. Homer and Hesiod, the only 2 I have. Oh, Theognis. Also Theognis. So we had epic works like Odyssey and Iliad and Works and Days, Theogony. And this set the pace. Greek mythology was a series of traditions even older that went back, but they were never really codified. They were just remembered. But Thales of Miletus started something, scientific thought. We have no records from ancient Egypt of the Egyptians trying to explore the cosmos and try to figure things out. They reported things as deities, gods, and phenomena, but they never reported things scientifically. Neither did the Babylonians. But we have scientific information embedded in Sumerian text. The Sumerian texts are highly scientific, many of them, and then later devolve into like mythos. But we have this vast difference between different civilizations and cultures, and suddenly the Greeks are like a scientific people. They want to know everything. They want to know everything, trying to figure everything out. And Thales of Miletus was the first. Why is this important? Because it shows that the Phoenix phenomenon is absolutely on point. 1135 BC, the sinking of Atlantis, the invasion of the Tuatha Dé to conquer Ireland by defeating the giants called the Firbolgs in the Second Battle of Moytura, all 1135 BC. The sun darkens, destroying ancient China. In Shang Dynasty, 250,000 people have to catch out by ships, or they're going to be killed by the new dynasty that's rising in, because the mandate of heaven, which means a cataclysm, had changed, meaning the emperor was dethroned and the emperor's family and retainer had to be banished, or if they stayed, they'd be killed. So 250,000 Chinese ended up in Veracruz State, Central America, Oaxaca. They became the Olmec when they intermarried with local people. Everybody that's 1135 BC. 1135 BC started the Great Mediterranean Dark Age, just like Plato said. After the Atlanteans went to war with the Greeks, it was a period not long after the Great War in the Mediterranean, which we know of was 2229 BC. It was known as the Fall of Troy, the Battle for Ilium, a 10-year war over Mediterranean trade, because the new race from the Atlantic coasts were trying to break into the Black Sea trade empire. And the people of Troy, of the state of Ilium, were a finger of the great ancient Hittite empire. And they weren't going to allow those ships through the Dardanelles. This is what the Trojan War was about. When they tried to breach, it started a series and chain of events. Many of the Atlanteans were enslaved when they tried to go in Egypt. Some colonies survived. They became the Philistines and the Phoenicians. This Atlantean empire, though, 94 years after the Great War, just like Plato said, he said a short period after the Great War, a cataclysm happened and Atlantis sank beneath the sea. It's exactly what we have. 94 years after 2229 BC is precisely 1135 BC. The great Mediterranean Dark Age began, which I have done videos on. 300 years of a total systemic collapse, starvation, collapse of literacy, and the very first breathings of civilization that come out of this are 250 years later, when suddenly we have Homer, Theognis, and Hesiod. Then another 250 years, and we have Thales of Miletus, begins the scientific epic. And with him, it is now rapid fire compressed into a 245-year period. For 245 years, the Greeks make discovery after discovery after discovery after discovery after discovery, and then they hit a wall. And when they hit that wall, they come into contact with a civilization that retarded their development. That civilization is Rome. And during the entire period of the Roman occupation of Greece and the Roman occupation of the Mediterranean and the provincial system, the empire that spread out, Rome literally created a situation where there would be no more scientific, no more naturalist growth. And it lasted for over 1,000 years. So I'm really still in my intro, but this is what happened. Thales of Miletus kicked it off. 550 BC, Anaximander. Remember, I'm reading to you the core conclusions of researchers who had access to information and made observations that we didn't do and that we don't have access to. These aren't light statements that these men published. Anaximander, 550 years BC, said all land creatures developed from amphibians. Time is endless, but the universe is repeatedly destroyed and reborn. Pythagoras, 10 years later, said Earth was the center of universal sphere. All celestial bodies circled the Earth. Now, we have 15 centuries between the post-flood Vedic records that say that we're on a globe. 15 centuries. And that our globe is going around the sun. This was the ancient Vedic. The oldest Sanskrit writings are technical, and this is what they say. We're on a globe and we're going around the sun. I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying that they became so advanced in their observations that the sky, which is a multi-tiered hologram, was able to fool them. And they accepted those conclusions as fact. 15 centuries later, Pythagoras didn't agree with that. The Greeks were descended from the Indo-Iranian culture that the Aryans were participants in, that wrote the Vedas. Pythagoras said Earth was the center of universal sphere. All celestial bodies circled the Earth. He also said nothing ever perishes, only changes form. He also said that the sea and the land change places. You're going to see that a few times in here, and it reminds us of Mother Shipton's prophecy that in the return of the sixth sky dragon, remember the sixth seal, the day of Ragnarok, when the return of the sixth sky dragon, mankind's new dynasty after that will be on former ocean beds. That's what she said. 500 BC, Xanthos of Sardis. Inland fossils prove the sea and land have changed places. The Greeks were great observers. They lived in a mountainous area. I'm pretty sure they found a lot of fossils and they wondered about them. But there's a certain class of fossils that the Greeks never found. They just suddenly appeared in the 1890s. In the 1890s, a whole class of fossils just suddenly appeared. Not one naturalist, not one book, not one historian before then ever mentioned any of these. We'll get to that in a little while. Also, 500 BC, Xenophanes of Colophon said that fossils were once living creatures and were proof that the land was once under sea. A very good, astute observation. He said sedimentary rocks were formed from debris the ocean had removed from land. I don't know if that's true or not, but it shows a critical thinker. It shows somebody who put a lot of thought to make a statement like that, to separate sedimentary rocks from igneous rocks or volcanic rocks or metamorphic rocks. Just the ability to separate the different types of rocks shows that they were critically thinking. 450 BC, Anaxagoras, in his text on nature, springs and lakes were fed from subterranean rivers. Does this sound like a primitive people to you? 450 BC, Herodotus of Halicarnassus, in his epic huge book, The Histories. Lower Egypt, had once been a gulf. That's amazing. I've already showed you in Archaix that the delta region is a delta for a reason, because it used to be under the Mediterranean, and the Great Pyramid was halfway submerged in water. The Giza complex was halfway under the water of the Mediterranean. The pyramid used to be an island. You had to take a boat out to it. And when you did, more than 60, 70% of the structure was underwater. And the whole desert was the bottom of that ancient sea. It was an extension of the Mediterranean. It's why ancient Egypt used to be called the raised land, because in 1899 BC, the entire North African plate in an earthquake just went up about 300 feet. It just went up 300 feet, which is nothing when you're talking about the size of the continent. 300 feet elevation is nothing. Remember, in a single day, Tiwanaku, the ruins of Pumapunka, Lake Titicaca, all the ruins that are around there, the whole fossilized shoreline is at 12,000 feet altitude in the Andes Mountains. From the Ogygian deluge in 1687 BC, in one day, the uplift shoved them all the way up and preserved those ruins so Poznański in 1901 and 1902 could actually study the site. It was so well preserved. Too cold up there. Nobody went up there and mess with that stuff. So here it is right here. Herodotus knew that Lower Egypt, North Egypt, was all underwater. Here it is. 430 BC, Empedocles of don't give me the lion. Agrigentum, on his book called On Nature, Earth had a core and was molten. Are you reading this? I'm not trying to butt heads with my flat earth brothers. I love the out-of-the-box thinkers. I'm not trying to butt heads with all those who are trying to claim you just don't know. But you have to understand, in the historical record, when a civilization and culture starts getting more and more intelligent, more and more observant of their environment, they come to core conclusions because the sky is lying. And one of the core conclusions was that Earth had a core and was molten. In order to believe that it had a core and was molten, he too, Empedocles, followed Pythagoras and believed that the world was round, believed that it was a globe. This is their core conclusions. This isn't Jason making this up. This is what the ancient Greeks believed. Now, Empedocles also said huge fossil bones belong to human titans now extinct. We have records of giant bones found in many ancient texts. And those giant bones always belonged to giant humans. 420 BC, Leucippus in the Great World System wrote, this is 420 years before the alleged birth of Jesus. This is a long time ago. Leucippus wrote, all matter consists of tiny particles which are eternal and never still. Yeah, that right there is compelling for the time. Democritus of Abdera, 400 BC, almost 25 centuries ago. All matter is made of atoms, which are eternal and never still, and that nothing is truly destroyed. These are very advanced concepts. Call them the Archaean quantum physicist of their day. 370 BC, Plato on cosmology. The sun and moon circles the earth as did a belt of stars. So here we have geocentrist sentiment. The earth is a sphere, and the sun and the moon go around the sphere with the stars. This was the concept of Plato. 340 BC, Plato's student, Aristotle, in Meteorologica, wrote, land and sea alternated locations. This is exactly what we have shown in Archaix in the archaeological record. Newer civilizations that are thousands of years old now, but they were new then, were built on ocean beds. Aristotle also wrote, there were historical reversals between tropical and polar temperature regions and between dry land and seas. That's an amazing observation for Aristotle. Back then, they didn't have the type of transportation we have. He had to go by writings that were extant at his time from other explorers and other naturalists. He had to put all that together to determine that there had been reversals in climate. Formerly tropical areas became polar, and former polar regions became tropical. What kind of information did they have access to back then to make that determination? Now we have a vast leap. We have a vast leap from Aristotle to Lucretius. And in between Aristotle and Lucretius, she doesn't really cite anybody. The state of science had become basically uniform. Quit learning. There was no further developments. People were now just saying the same thing that their Greek predecessors had said. In 70 BC, though, we have something new. Lucretius on the nature of the universe. Earthquakes were caused by violent winds inside the hollow earth, and also by collapse of subterranean cavern walls. Lucretius also stated, as I've got in my published book, When the Sun Darkens, he wrote that an unknown body darkens the earth at a fixed time. Note, he's not talking about the moon. Now, the Greek geographer Strabo in 40 BC, Geographica, wrote that seafloor sometimes rises and falls, affecting sea level, causing flooding. That's what the Phoenix does. Upheavals and subsidence. And Strabo said that upheavals are caused by Earth's internal fire. Volcanoes are the Earth's way of releasing pressure to minimize earthquake activity. All very advanced concepts. This is a Greek geographer. 60, Common Era. We have now gone into the AD period, Anno Domini. Our modern calendar now, Anno Domini. 60 CE, Common Era. Pliny the Elder, Natural History, famously died at Mount Vesuvius eruption trying to rescue a friend. His son lived on, Pliny the Younger. This is Pliny the Elder. Some fossils fell from the sky during thunderstorms, and some had fallen when the moon is eclipsed. What in the hell was Pliny? Pliny should have wrote a book on mushrooms. But then again, let's take him at face value, because we've learned to trust Pliny. He's got some fantastic, his book, Natural History, is epic. I'm going to be doing a video on it. Some fossils fell from the sky during thunderstorms, and some had fallen when the moon is eclipsed. He also wrote that an unknown body covers the sun, darkening it at regular intervals. Wasn't talking about the moon. He said an unknown body. So we have another leap. We have a leap of 100 years before we get to Theophilus of Antioch. It's a 100-year leap. Now, remember what's going on at the time. Christianity is now literally taking over. It's spreading like wildfire. But Christianity brings criticism of the scientific. Christianity brings a cult-type behavior that is infecting free thought. Book burnings and all this is going on. So Theophilus of Antioch, in his apology of Christianity, remember what I told you about the early Christian records? They're heavily apologetic, as if they're trying to defend themselves because the whole world believes they're full of shit and that the Jesus gospel story never happens. And this is the tone of all the first 300 years of Christian texts. They're all very apologetic. So apologetic means they're on the defensive. Apology of Christianity. The world was created in the year 5529. Wow. 270 years is real close when you're talking about that many millennia ago. The world was created in the year 5529. I'm not saying that he's right that the world was created, but in the Archaix chronology, we have the historical record begins with the Anunnaki-Ner chronology of 600-year periods beginning in 5239 BC. So whatever chronological data he had access to him from maybe the Alexandrian library, or the Pergamum library, whatever he was researching and going through to make that claim of 5529 BC, that's pretty close. It's amazing. 200 years AD, Tertullian, in concerning the resurrection of the flesh, wrote, seashells found on mountains had been deposited there during the Great Flood. That's pretty good. That's pretty fair. That's pretty fair. So I don't know what happened between 200 CE and 530 CE. Well, I kind of do. The Dark Ages began, for one. But in the Western world, in the Eastern and Western branches of Christianity, all those scribes and texts, all those belief systems, in the Western world, Tertullian literally represents the last of any scientific thinking. It's over with. It's weird. The next great reset for the Western world, at least, is 522 AD. And we've gone through that ad nauseum in Archaix, multiple videos on how the Anno Domini calendar was really created to hide the 552-year Phoenix cycle. But right here, returning back to India, we have in 530 of AD, Aryabhata wrote that the Earth moves through space with the other planets. So not much has changed in India. Because they preserved the Vedas through the Puranic commentaries, this body of information, although it's slightly changed over the millennia, they still keep to the core conclusions of the post-reset Sanskrit scholars who had put that material together after the Great Flood in 2000 BC, when around 2000 BC, when the Vedas were written. So their core compositions were post-reset, but they were preserving things from before the cataclysm. And in India, it looks like we still have a continuum of the beliefs and conclusions of the Vedas. Nothing's changed. The ancient Sanskrit promoted heliocentrism. It promoted a model where the Earth revolves around the sun, and that Earth is a planet, and the other wanderers are planets as well. Like I said, don't crucify me, guys. I'm just telling you what happens to civilizations when they get advanced. They fall for the deceit. The sky lies. So again, same period of time, 560 Common Era. I'm going to try and pronounce that. Varahamahira. I don't know if that's right. Varahamahira. I don't know. The Great Compendium. The location and severity of earthquakes is determined by the location of the moon. How come we have never heard anything like that? Or have we? I just don't really pay attention to a lot of people. Has anybody ever brought this to Dutch sense? Because I'm about to read several more, all the way to modern times, where scholars in ancient times to modern times are all claiming that the position of the moon has everything to do with the timing and position of earthquakes. It's crazy. So here it is from India, that the location and severity of earthquakes is determined by the location of the moon. So before we get to back to the West, we have this lacuna in history starting in the 6th century. In the 6th century AD, we have the appearance of the Phoenix and the appearance of the Nemesis X object in the same year, 522 AD, for the first time ever. Remember, I did a video showing you guys every 138 years going forward and backward in time, every 792 years going forward and backward in time. I even went beyond the perimeters of the Archaix research, and I started at 5239 BC, and I went 5,000 years into the past. And then I started at the end in 2178 AD, the final systemic reset before the whole system goes back to Genesis, to year one. I started at 2178 and I went 138 years into the future, 792 years in the future, 5,000 years. And these two objects never touch the same years. That's incredible that the only time they would ever touch is in 522 AD. So 522 AD is very compelling, as many of you know. It's when the Catholic Church had completely rewritten history and the Justinian plagues and all that. But we'll get to that. The reason it's important in this narrative right now is because if you look at your screen, you're going to see that Susan Thompson, in her book of collecting data of scientific innovations all throughout history, completely ignored a 500-year period. Why? Because there's nothing to report. It was the Dark Age, total systemic reset. People weren't worried about the world they lived in. They were worried about feeding themselves. We go in the Western world, we literally go from Tertullian in 200 to 522 when the Great Reset happened. Tertullian, it was like a degenerative period. Religion and fanaticism is taking the place of civility and science. This is the world. This is the breakdown we had before 522. 522, it got ugly. And then the Phoenix phenomenon, the Great Justinian darkness, 25-year darkness and plague period. It's very well documented. I've done videos on it, itemizing all the things around the world that were documented at that time. And then 522, all the way to 1020 Common Era. 500 years, the Dark Ages. She's got nothing recorded. The Western world had totally collapsed. The Eastern world wasn't doing much better. They weren't coming out with new material. They were really preserving the old Sanskrit, making copies. That's what the 560 reference is right here, the Great Compendium. So 1020 is where civilization starts waking up, but it's very, very slow. It's been a while. Nobody said anything to me, so I need to check my chat real quick. I've been running my mouth. All right. So we're looking good. 2,000 people in the chat. Thank you for joining me. Guys, this presentation is just getting started. I know we've been talking for 54 minutes, but this is we got some ground to cover and some core conclusions to make from this data. All this data, every single one of these data points were taken out of Susan Thompson's book. I believe that was Indiana University Library. She did her research, published the book. It's fantastic. She knows nothing of the Phoenix reset protocol, the Phoenix phenomenon. She knows nothing about it. She was just recording the facts, just the facts, ma'am. So we're using her book to show that it lines up perfectly with the resets that are recorded in the Phoenix chronology. All right, let's go with. All right, let's go back to sharing my screen. All looks good here. All right, so So 500 years after the Dark Ages begins in 522, we have around the year 1020, Avicenna, in his Book of the Remedy, wrote, Meteoric stones fall to the earth from the heavens. The reason this is very compelling is because we have citations from the Royal Society of England as late as the 1800s, where scientists literally argued with each other, saying that it's impossible for stones to fall out of the sky because the sky is not made of stones. These were real scientific debates in the 1800s. And yet right here, 1020, meteoric stones fall to the earth from the heavens. 170 years later, in China, we have Xu Si, who wrote, fossils were once living organisms. You don't have a lot coming out of China in the West. In the West, we just don't, we haven't really, there's not too many things we just know. I recorded in my Chronicon as many things that I found about the Chinese. So also in Xu Si, we have soft materials on ocean floors harden and are uplifted to become mountains. That's pretty compelling. I don't know if it's true, but it's very compelling that somebody had done enough research to make that conclusion. So we have to jump about over 300 years to 1500. Remember, this is the Dark Ages, going in the Middle Ages. 1500 A.D. Olivia of Cremona wrote that fossils were mere sports of nature. You see the back and forth here? A few hundred years before, fossils were once living organisms. This guy in 1500 says that fossils were sports of nature. Okay, we're talking about a 520-something-year-old writing. Therefore, fossils were sports of nature is the same thing today as saying fossils are Mandela effects. Fossils are glitches in reality. Because if they're sports of nature, then he's admitting that nature has the ability to program tomfoolery, tomfuckery in it. It's a very interesting concept for 1500 AD. Fossils were sports of nature. The year is 1517. Girolamo Fracastoro in Opera Omnia wrote, fossils are the extinct creatures that had died when the land and the sea switched places. We know it does that. 1557, Gabriel Fallopius in Opera, oh my gosh, what is that? Genuna Omnia, fossil remains of elephants and sharks were just earthly concretions. Here's another one. We've already determined in the human family that fossils were once living organisms. But these guys here are basically telling their contemporaries that you're being fooled. Fossils aren't real. Fossils are just earthly concretions. They're not once living organisms. They're going backwards. 1558, Georgius Agricola, De Natura Fossilium. He wrote that fossils were composed of earth and water and simply grew just as minerals and plants grow. Again, they're going backwards. Agricola, he's famous, going backwards. 1580, Bernard Palissy, in his discourse, wrote, fossils were once living organisms. These men lived at the same time. These are scientists who have absolutely different conclusions. That's what science should be about. People should be able to dissent without having their funding taken away from them to silence them. 1584, Giordano Bruno, on his text on immensity, wrote, Earth is a spherical body with oceans deeper than mountains are tall. Pretty good. Pretty good. Giordano Bruno, you guys already know, Roman Catholic Church killed him. Earth is a spherical body with oceans deeper than mountains are tall. Also, Giordano Bruno, in The Expulsion of the Triumphant Beast, he wrote, "There was never a universal deluge, only local flooding." Man, I'm going to drink to that, Bruno. The Great Flood was a bunch of flooding, but the whole world didn't flood. Moving up to 1610, Siegfried Porcius in Mineralographia wrote, "Amber is petrified resin." Moving up there. 1620, you guys know him, Francis Bacon, Novum Organum, wrote, he noticed the similarity between the African and the Peruvian coasts, separated only by the Atlantic. Francis Bacon noticed that. He's also famous for a lot of stuff. 1633, you guys know this name, Rene Descartes, in his text, Le Monde, the Moon. A planet is formed by gravitational attraction of small star collecting matter. These are advanced concepts. Great, huge. It took a lot of imagining to put all this together. I'm not saying it's true. I believe the sky is holographic, but they believed it was real. And in observing the sky and seeing the sun is round, the moon is round, seeing the phases of the moon, which gives it a spherical effect, yeah, all this is holographic, and it makes seeing the obliquity of 23.5 degrees. Yeah, it literally, the whole moving of the stellosphere, it literally, the more you study it, the more you realize, oh, wow, that's all these stars are around a pole. A pole infers a half a dome. Well, if a half a dome, but the moon can be round sometimes, and the sun's round, and maybe we're completely spherical too. And then that leads to further conclusions. And then comet paths lead to more conclusions. Then the seasons lead to conclusions. Everything is deceitful. The sky lies. But an intelligent observer will almost always buy into it. Until someone switches their perspective from the sky back to the ground they're living on and studies the plane, they're not going to make these discoveries that we've been making, that we pretty much live on in a realm. We live in a construct, and that the sky is trying to get us to believe that we live in a cosmos when we don't. 1639, Gabriel Plates wrote A Discovery of Infinite Treasure. Magnetic attraction of a heavenly bodies held Earth in the center of the universe. So here, this guy's going back. He's not buying into the earlier heliocentric model of the Greeks. He's not buying into that model that Earth is moving around a star. He's not. He believes Earth is the dead center, and the sun and the moon and the stars are moving around the Earth. He also wrote that present geography was explained by the fact of a subsequent flooding and destruction that happened after the Great Flood. He is absolutely precise. Present geography was explained by fact of a subsequent flooding and destruction that happened after the Great Flood. How did he know this? 1639 AD, Gabriel Plates, in his book, A Discovery of Infinite Treasure, literally admitted right here the Ogygian deluge in 1687 BC, which totally effed off the world, collapsed every single Bronze Age civilization. Remember, guys, I've showed you in my published books and in my videos, W.J. Perry wrote a 551-page book. It's called Children of the Sun. And in that book, he lists all these civilizations that Egypt was the mother, the crown mother over all these colonies that were sent all over the world. And he documents it so well, the children of the sun. And yet his core conclusion in his epic, gigantic book is that about 1688 BC, every single Bronze Age dynasty collapsed. 1688, about 1688 BC, is a scientific bullseye for the month of May, 1687 BC. This guy must have had access to that data to say that. He said present geography was explained by fact of a subsequent flooding and destruction that happened after the Great Flood. We know the Ogygian deluge changed the topography of the Mediterranean, of North Africa. It changed the topography of South America. It created the Andes Mountains in a day, thrusting whole ancient cities that were built at sea level with quays and docking bays and wharfs, and all that was thrust to 12,000 feet. (1644). John Lightfoot, in Harmony of the Four Evangelists, this man concluded that the creation occurred in 3928 BC. Did you guys hear me say that? Did you hear that? 3928 BC. That is incredible. 3928 BC. I mean, you know what? You guys think I'm an expert mathematician. You just don't know. I cheat calculator. I don't want to be wrong about this. 3928. Oh my God, he's 33 years off. Why did it have to be that number? He's 33 years off of 3895 BC. Adam and Eve reset. Total systemic phoenix reset. Collapse. New heavens and new earth. Let me show it to you. Let me talk to you about it. I don't want to talk to you about it. I want to show you. You guys have seen it before. See here. All right. That's not the one. Here's a good one. So look at this. Look at this old chart. There's the line in the middle is the Great Flood. Our study today starts 239 years after. Our study today started with the Rig Veda, 2000 BC, which was the composition. It was the compiled writings of a post-reset society. Why is it post-reset? Because they suffered the Great Flood. It's right here in the middle. It's right here. Great Deluge. After this, we have all these civilizations. Before that's pre-flood world. The Anuna appeared 1,200 years before the flood, or 432,000 shars before the flood. Right here. This is the 1656 years of the pre-flood world. But I'm of the opinion the flood is the collapse of the second vapor canopy. The first vapor canopy collapsed when the Anuna appeared. Now, let's see. Here is the Phoenix Genesis pole shift right there, 3895 BC. That is the date that this man is trying to. He's 33 years off. Now, I know some of you are going to think that he knew this exact date and that 33 years is intentional. I'm not saying it's not. But he's 33 years off this, saying it's the creation. When he says creation, he's talking about Genesis 1, 2, and 3, about Adam and Eve, the serpent, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and all that. That story starts right here, 3895 BC. Phoenix Genesis pole shift. He nailed it. It's a scientific bullseye because they always give themselves plus or minus 100 or 200 years. Here it is right here, scientific bullseye. He's only 33 years off. And right here, after the Great Flood, is where our story begins for this video, because we don't have anything for the pre-flood world. What we have is the Sanskrit, which is post-reset, compiled by the survivors of a technologically advanced civilization that did not survive. Its infrastructure did not survive this event right here called the Great Deluge, 2239 BC. After the Great Deluge, now we have writing appear in logograms. Pictograms become logograms, and now we have cuneiform adapted so it can be basically trans-kingdom, transnational. And now we have all these texts. They do not date from before the flood. All these cuneiform texts, although they still concern events of the pre-flood world, the actual dating of the cuneiform tablets of the Near East and the oldest Sumerian tablets, they're still actually compositions of this period here between these two areas, which is after the great flood of Noah. This is the Sumerian logographic, the cuneiform, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, the hieroglyphic, Rongo, all fit right here. After that, we have the Heleolithic Maritime Empire in this period, right here between the flood and the Ogygian flood reset. Here is the one that really changed the topography of the world. The Ogygian flood reset, 1687 BC. I have 2 published books and 5 videos about this one date. Well, 5 videos about this one date, but in 2 books I cover this event. But 1687 BC is covered in probably 40 of my videos. It's huge. Here is the total collapse of literacy right here. Priorly we had the Minoan Linear A. Then we had a disaster in Minoan Linear B came out. Then after the collapse of Minoan Linear B, we have Phoenician, which became the alphabets of the Greeks. Here's 1135 BC I told you guys about. Here's the Great Mediterranean Dark Age begins. Look at this huge period. This chart here was done from a different data set. You remember this chart, guys? Archaix veterans, you remember when I did a video showing a book from 1877, and the entire book was nothing but a chronology. It was a huge book. And it was a huge, and I flipped through it and I showed you guys the dates. According to scholarship in 1877, here's a list of all the most ancient texts that we have surviving today. And I showed you the dates of all the texts, and they fit right here. Here are the dates. No dates for hundreds of years after 1135 BC. Then we have the Odyssey, the Iliad, Theogony. After the Great Mediterranean Dark Age, the world was waking up. That's when these little dots are. And all these little lines you see here are ancient texts that have survived to 1877 of our calendar. And when we had the text. And then we have this black bar, which is so many texts. We have thousands of texts from the ancient world. But that's starting at about 300 BC all the way till now. The reason this chart was good is because it's further verification. The survival of ancient manuscripts and the dates of their composition was actual proof that the Phoenix phenomenon is the reason why we're going through these dark age periods. It's right here. So we are now looking at the same thing, but from a different perspective. Instead of ancient texts that survived, like this chart shows, this data set, we're now looking at Susan Thompson's research on scientific innovations of the time, and it's a totally different way of looking at the same thing. Remember, if something is true, you're going to see it from multiple different vantage points. It's the same. Okay, here is shown just a little better. This is the historical record right here. You can see 35th century BC, the appearance of the Anuna, call them Anunnaki, whatever you want to. 35th century BC, the explosion of population, agriculture, urban development, cereals, domestication of animals, all that exploded right here. But why then? Why in the 35th century BC are anthropologists convinced that all these things just suddenly appeared and without inexplicably it spread like wildfire? In a 100-year period, we went from Neolithic pre-pottery woodcutters and hunter-gatherers, and suddenly started building sprawling cities with vast urban developments, canal works and all that. What happened? I'm going to tell you what happened. I'm going to show it to you in another chart. But right when that happened, that's the historical record, because the ancient cuneiform refers to periods before the flood when all this was going on. This is the Ubaid period, the Sumerian period, the Harappan period, basically the pre-dynastic Egyptian period. All this right here fits. This little area right here where you see the text. All that right there is Mari, Ugarit, Rashamra, China, Urumbaba, South America, the Maya, Olmec, Babylon, Jericho, Malta, Stonehenge, Newgrange, all this in this little bitty period. But this chart was specifically drawn to show you how ridiculous it is to believe that Atlantis was way back here, when in the actual text it's 1135 BC. So let me show you why the 35th century. You're going to have to see another chart to understand it. I provided that chart on YouTube today. So let's look at it. Let me show you why. If you look to the far left, the little black box at the bottom, right here, this is, right here, 3895 BC. That's 3895 BC. That's year 1 Anno Mundi, according to the ancient scholars. This is the old calendar, the old world's calendar. If you look, the very first 552-year period of the pre-flood world is black. Why is it black? Because here's another one, approximately 1,000 years, 0 advancements. This whole 552-year period, we have almost nothing in the historical record that says anything other than that people were living like animals. That's it. But in the second 552-year period, all of a sudden, we have all the advancement. Enoch appears, the Anuna appear, urban centers, agriculture, the Great Pyramid Complex, vast pre-flood cities, which are named on the Sumerian king list, they all appear in this yellow circle. This is the second 552-year period, Phoenix cycle. It doesn't continue to the flood because this final 552 years is the height of the reign of the 7 kings, which introduced the Nephilim dynasties, which introduced the wars of the giants, which introduced the fall of the Titans, which introduced a cataclysm 414 years before the flood, which created a vapor canopy. We have a vapor canopy created in this 552-year period after the Great Pyramid, and it was a totally different type of civilization. The Sumerian king list says that there was 241,200 shars that the 7 kings ruled over the Sumerian Pentapolis, beginning their reign as Sippar, and then Bad Tabira and Shuruppak, where the flood happened. And the survivor of the flood happened to be the king of Shuruppak right before the event took place. This isn't circled here because it's a degenerative period. It is a period of decline all the way to the Great Flood. That's why this first 552-year period is exactly why you saw right here what I showed you. Oh, next chart. The 35th century BC explosion of population, agriculture, urban development, cereals, domestication of animals, because the 35th century BC was the 456th year of the Anno Mundi calendar. After 3895 BC, this means it was the 35th century BC when Enki appeared, 432,000 shars before the Great Flood, which is 1,200 years. 432,000 divided by 360 of the Sumerian sexagesimal reckoning is precisely 12 centuries. 3439 BC is the 35th century BC, and it was precisely 1,200 years before the Great Flood, which is 2 Anunnaki Ner of 600 years apiece. So Enki appears, or Enoch appears, the Anuna appears, and now we have a flooding of all kinds of sciences and all that. How do we know? Because the book of Enoch talks about it. The book of Enoch literally lists all the watchers and everything they brought to the table. The ones that brought metallurgy, how to make armor, how to make weapons, how to make medicines, how to read the stars, astronomy, how to read and write, the scribal techniques, how to make herbs and medicines, how to do, was it demon exercises, exercise evil spirits. There's a whole list in the book of Enoch of what the watchers brought to the table. And when you look at it chronographically, it's the 35th century BC. So I went to showing these charts. I don't even remember why now. So here's the beginning. New heavens and new earth, 3895 BC. Starts a vapor canopy right here, 3895 BC. Pre-flood world is 1656 years. It's 552 times 3 to the Great Flood. Collapse of the vapor canopy. But this would be a second canopy. which is 552 years to the Ogygian deluge, 1687 BC, that really destroyed the world and really retarded human development. It was terrible. After 1687, after 2239 BC, we have a couple centuries of no development. We have no development. Why? Because everybody was just trying to survive. 1687 BC, we have a couple centuries, absolutely no development. Right here. Here's a lesser one, but it's still 552 years. 1135 BC. Started the Great Mediterranean Dark Age. Look at this. It's 500 excuse me. It's 552 years to 583 BC when Thales of Miletus predicted the darkening of the sun. So, the Great Mediterranean Dark Age that sank Atlantis 1135 BC was one phoenix cycle. 552 years, which is 138 times 4 to 583 BC, which started our study today. That's where we started. Why did we start there? Wasn't me. It's her book. She started there, explaining how Thales of Miletus began Greek scientific thought. So here's the Anno Domini reset, the great dark age of the world, really 522 AD. It's perfectly on the 552-year Phoenix cycle. And remember, I have the video on the Anno Domini calendar. I show the actual books and in text for you to see for yourself where it is admitted that the Roman Catholic Church specifically altered the calendar and created the calendar that you know as the AD calendar, AD BC. They specifically created it to hide an older calendar called the Vedic calendar, which was 552 years. It's a Phoenix cycle. Specifically did that and created this new calendar that we're in today. And this new calendar is what began the Dark Age. This Dark Age period is very, very significant because of this. We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. 522 AD. Right here. 522 AD. You see it right there on the screen. I can't put it in the center, but there it is. 522 AD is what? Approximately 1,000 years of zero advancements all the way to here. We're going to get to that. We haven't got that far yet. I need to get there. We'll get to this chart later. So there's your chart tangent. We'll get back to these charts in a minute. Let me check my chat because I really went way off my timeline here. Let's see here. Let's see here. Now. All right. Did you guys see all that? Or did I exit my sharing mode? Because I see me on the screen right now. Were you guys seeing those charts? Did I exit the screen right? Yeah, you saw it? Good, thank you. Man, I hate to do that again. Look at me, all discombobulated. Okay. Diving in. Thank you for joining me. We got over 2,000 people in the chat. Guys, I'm sorry. Going to be a long video. Maybe not 4 hours, probably not 4 hours, but we got some major ground to cover, and we got some. Listen, when it comes to a lot of things you guys tried to bring to my attention, you know, I've kept you at arm's length because if information doesn't come by way of logic, if I can't get to it by a logic train, by basic deductive reasoning, I can't have somebody just tell me something and accept it as true. Such as you guys have been telling me for 2 years dinosaurs are fake. Dinosaurs aren't real. And I'm like, you know what? It's not really an argument to me because I believe that during the vapor canopy, reptiles and amphibians grew to astonishing sizes. Now, I never really gave it much thought until I went through over 1,000 data points in this book. I'm just pulling out 150 for you guys, but I went through over 1,000 data points in this book. And by the time I got to the end of this book, of all the major things that science has assumed to be true, all the way up to the 1899, and then it was painfully obvious to me that there was something very, very wrong with the conclusions because dinosaurs weren't mentioned. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that here. So remember, guys, you got to be careful about people practicing exclusions. But sometimes it's the exclusions that tell you the actual truth of what's going on. It's amazing. So let's get to it. I'm about to present. I'm going back in, pick up where I left off. I know y'all getting dizzy watching me. Oh, that's where I got that. Okay. 1644, John Lightfoot, in his Harmony of the Four Evangelists, wrote, the creation occurred in 3928 BC. The man is 33 years off of the truth. Not that the creation happened in 3895. That's a common misconception. But that the timeline, the Anno Mundi timeline that started with the Adam and Eve reset. Remember, the creation of Adam and Eve in Genesis, when you pay attention to the details, is a reset story. It is not a creation event. It is the renovation of a world that had just been destroyed. And Adam and Eve were naked, not because they were pure. They were naked because in a reset civilization, they were just living hand to mouth. They didn't have any clothes. They were ignorant. They weren't educated anymore. That's what it was really about. So the following year, oh man, we got this stranger here, Athanasius Kircher, 1645, in his Subterranean World. I have a copy of it. It says the Earth's center pushed magma, creating volcanoes. Okay. In 1665, we have Robert Hooke, a very interesting individual. Robert Hooke in Micrographia wrote, fossils were created when life forms died in flooding and earthquakes. We're getting more sophisticated. 1667, Nicholas Steno, the earth was a surface of layers filled with fossils. 1667. I'm telling you guys right now that our science today is no different than what they're saying in 1665. What these guys are saying right now. Steno also said that fossils were once marine animals whose bodies were replaced by minerals. 1666. He said this in 1666. In 1668, in Discourse of Earthquakes, Robert Hooke comes back and says, Earth's axial rotation and movement could be affected by earthquakes, which would then alter conditions that would result in changes in species, and that fossils were the record of just such changes. I put in parentheses biospheres. Robert Hooke is literally telling us that his research and observations well over 300 years ago conveyed to him that cataclysms can change biospheres and that the biospheres will change the biological organisms within them. This is the main hardcore Archaix tenet that we have had different biospheres. One of them has been a vapor canopy, a couple vapor canopies, and that in the vapor canopy there are major changes in human anatomy, human ability, our ability to heal, our ability to think, our ability to breathe. All these things are fundamental changes that change us. I have even gone as far as to show evidence that the creation of individual races was because those races come from biospheres that no longer exist. So here it is. It's very interesting. Changes in species come from changes in environment. He also wrote that more ancient climates were warmer, and fossils were proof of that. Vapor canopy, anyone? Fossils could be used to date past disasters. The change in the length of day could change life forms on Earth. We've already had one change like that. In 713 BC, something appeared in the sky. Flash burned 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in their armor who served Sennacherib. Sennacherib was executed for that when he got back to Assyria. The army was returning from Egypt, passing by way of Jerusalem. The prophet Isaiah was called to the court of King Hezekiah because King Hezekiah was in a certain room called the sundial room of a former king named Ahaz. And King Hezekiah could not figure out why the sun stopped moving. The sundial stopped, the shadow on the sundial not only stopped moving, but then retrograded 10 degrees before stopping again. And then the sun continued on its journey from the retrograde. Couldn't figure it out. Asked the prophet Isaiah. Prophet Isaiah told him, you've been given a chance. This is a sign that Jerusalem will be delivered. And right after that, a flux tube blast vaporized 185,000 Assyrians. And in the apocalypse of Barak, we read that the people of Jerusalem ran out to the fields and they saw, and the fields were smoking, and the actual Assyrians had been turned to powder inside their armor, and their weapons and their armor and their clothes were untouched. So we have this, and ever since then, all the civilizations in the world, as I've documented multiple times in multiple presentations and in my published books, so many sources, it's incontrovertible. It was that event of the 10-degree retrograde of the sun in the sky that changed the calendar from 360 days to 365.24 days that we have today. We have a change coming in the book of Revelation to a 243-day year and a 16-hour day. I assure you that the prophecies that are found in Revelation and in 1st and 2nd Esdras are absolutely accurate, that there will be changes in the human body. There will also be changes in babies as they're given birth. It's all in 1st and 2nd Esdras. So he's right. He also wrote, Hooke also wrote, because present fuel in the earth had diminished, earthquakes and volcanoes were more common in ancient times. Giantism. I had to put giantism in parentheses. It's another Archaix fundamental. In ancient times, ambient radiation from volcanic activity created giants. There were no angels that had sex with human women. That is a Jewish fable that became the actual template for all other historical books. Nothing before the 5th century BC, when the Jews invented that myth and put it in Genesis, is there even a hint of any belief anywhere in the world that angels had sex with human women to create giants. It doesn't exist. Ancient Greeks don't have anything like that. What the ancient Greek model is the actual historical record model. From Sanchuniathon, the Phoenician historian, all the way to Plutarch. The histories of the Titans were that the human race itself was gigantic. Why? Because the megafauna were. A scientist finds a gigantic iguana in 1841. Called it an iguanodon. But that's all it was a giant iguana. Other reptiles and amphibians have been found. They've been given ridiculous names and in artistic depictions to claim that they looked a little bit different than the bones that were found. Often, whole entire creatures have been artistically put together, imagined that way, from just finding 3 teeth. Oh yeah, the rabbit hole gets deep when it comes to these dinosaurs. Well, we'll get to that. That's where this video is leading. Right here, we have, Robert Hooke says, because present fuel in the earth had diminished, earthquakes and volcanoes were more in common in ancient times, meaning we're not experiencing volcanoes or earthquakes near as much as our predecessors did. And yet it was our predecessors that were always writing epics. Remember, I have a video that lists all the epics. The whole video is nothing but all the epics from all around the world where the common denominator is giants. Yeah, they're in all the writings of the ancient world. 1668. In 1668, Francois Placé wrote, "Before the flood, the world was one gigantic landmass, but the cataclysm broke up the surface in subsidence and upheavals." Again, one of the Archaix tenets is the Phoenix phenomenon. This is what it does. As the sky sim, which is going in a circle to make you believe that you're on a world rotating on an axis, as the sky sim moves, it will shudder and the sky sim will move erratically, which gives you it's discombobulating to someone on the surface, on the flat plane of the simulation, will actually believe by looking, the optics tells them they're on a world and that world is destabilized, earthquakes. The plane has areas that go up and go down. It vibrates, it spews. Every bit of that is deceptive. It's all to get the occupant inside the simulacrum to believe that they're on a world that is falling apart. And it's all deceit. And yes, part of the Phoenix phenomenon is subsidence and it is upheavals, and we've documented many. Whole areas of the world that go up, whole areas of the world that go down. 1669, Frederick Lachmann, fossils were once living organisms. 1677, Robert Plot in Natural History of Oxfordshire. I don't know if that's Oxfordshire or if that's Oxfordshire. Me, being a Central East Texas redneck, Oxfordshire. I'm going to say that right there is Oxfordshire. But it could be Oxfordshire. Fossils were random, shaped, naturally produced from the earth, not once living organisms. So we got Robert Plot here from old backwards neighborhood, old redneck neighborhood of Oxfordshire. Yeah, he's already going backwards. He went after 2,000 years of affirmations from the ancient Greeks that fossils were once living organisms. This guy goes the other direction in 1677. 1690. In 1690, I hope you guys appreciate the amount of work I put in this video. Yeah, she didn't come over there to Willis, Texas and type all this in there. I did. I read this whole book. I was so fascinated with it. You know, I marked everyone. You see that little mark? Everything I marked, you're reading right now. I typed all this, organized all this, changed all the fonts, put the color in there. I did all this because I'm going to PDF this. And I have a lot of free PDFs I'll be releasing soon from many presentations and videos that I never gave the PDFs away for free because I just got wrapped up doing things. But I'm going to spend a day PDFing a whole bunch of these research deals that I did for all these individual videos, and I'm going to put them on Podia for free. I'm also going to rearrange Podia in categories because there's going to be some things you have to buy. But I want hundreds of downloads that are absolutely free, especially my data sets that overturn a bunch of the BS that's out there. I want those free. So, this is going to be in the free in the free deals. And Archaix 3.0 is going to have a whole bunch of these PDFs because I don't want to tell you. I want to show you. 1690, Erasmus Warren in Discourse Concerning the Earth Before the Deluge. He wrote, "The creation took longer than 6 days." He also wrote, "The floodwaters were not higher than the mountains, and they did not alter the shape of the earth." Isn't that interesting? I don't know what data these guys had access to, but here's the second person that said the Great Flood was a great flood. It was all that, but it didn't do what a later flood did. The Ogygian deluge actually broke the world. It completely did devastating damage. It was a far worse cataclysm. But anyway, it's very interesting. Did not alter the shape of the earth like the Ogygian deluge did. It altered continents. 1691. I don't know William. Oh man, I don't have his last name, guys. I'm sorry. It's William something. 1691. Somebody named William wrote, "The Great Flood caused," I think it's William Smith. I'm not giving him a pseudonym. Really, I really actually have a Smith. Look out, guys, look. Oh, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Yeah, I believe it's William Smith. It was a super simple name like that. The Great Flood caused by falling vapor from passing comet, as well as subterranean waters boiling upward. Well, this is pretty close. This is pretty close to the historical record. We have a lot of citations of a strange body appearing in the sky. We know it's Typhon. Typhon is described by the Greeks as a comet sometimes. Also, the Great Flood wasn't just falling vapor, a vapor canopy. Here it is, falling vapor. A vapor canopy collapsed at the same time that internal pressure was boiling water from subsurface aquifers onto the surface, creating liquefaction. So yeah, it was devastating. It was terrible. It was a reset. There's a reason why even the Sanskrit Vedas weren't even composed until 240 years after the Great Flood. Yeah, there's a reason why. People were just trying to survive. So he also wrote that Earth is ordered and permanent in arrangement. That's the simulacrum. It just resets itself over and over and over and over. The Earth did not rotate on its axis until after the fall of man. What? Man, that's an awesome statement. Let me go back to that. The Earth did not rotate on its axis until after the fall of man. Let's break down that statement. The sun and the moon did not rotate in through pass across the sky. He's literally saying that the diurnal system did not exist, day and night. This is exactly what we have in Sumerian text that I quote in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, that when the Phoenix appeared in 4309 BC, 270 years before the appearance of the moon in 4039 BC, when the Phoenix appeared, the destruction was complete and the whole world darkened. The sun just didn't darken, the whole world darkened. And the Antiquity text said that long were the days, nights were added. Anshar and Kishar remained silent day and night. There was no turning of it was the long night. And I show that there was a 270-year period after the Phoenix destruction in 4309 BC, 270 years where the world was dark, completely frozen, dead. And then the moon appeared. And when the moon appeared, it moved the sky to spin. There was only a sun in one part of the sky, and it never moved. It never moved. It was far away, and most of the sky was dark. And in this period, the marsupials thrived. These are the not the placentals, not the mammals, the marsupials. So in the historical record in cuneiform text, we have such a period in the world that was after a destruction when the world was not turning day and night. The sun and the moon did not cross the sky. Well, the sun, the moon, and the stars did not cross the sky. The sky was dead. I don't know where he got his information, but the information I cite in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, and In Return of the Fallen Ones, my two books on the pre-flood world, yeah, I cite that cuneiform. I don't know where he got his information, but he's dead accurate because 3895 BC, according to the Genesis narrative, is when the sun and the moon, God created the sun, the moon, the earth, the stars, the birds, mankind, all that stuff. Well, literally, it's not a creation, it's a renovation of pre-existing materials that have been formerly destroyed. So Genesis 1 becomes a undoing of a cataclysm, a reset. This is exactly what we find. I've got many videos that break down Genesis 1, 2, 3 and show you how a vast destruction had just happened. Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So it's amazing that he would say this. The earth did not rotate on its axis until after the fall of man. Well, the fall of man is the Adam and Eve Phoenix reset. There it is. So amazing. 1700, Charles Lay, in Natural History of Lancashire. Fossils were sports of nature. Here we go. Charles is a dumbass. He's going backwards. 1700, Abraham de la Prime. Fossils prove the flood was worldwide and that the oceans and land masses changed their positions. 1703, Giorgio Baglivi. Earthquake activity increased by the power of the moon when the earth is in winter. Well, according to the uniformitarian astronomy model, when the earth is in winter, it's perihelion, meaning our world is closer to the sun, but the 23.5 degree obliquity, the inclinate tilt is away from the sun, therefore it's cold. So this is more information. I don't study earthquakes, but this is something maybe Dutch Sense would want to look into, that this is the second reference we have from the scientific record now that the earthquake activity increased by the power of the moon when the earth is in winter. Here are two references now that that earthquakes are increased by the moon and that the frequency of earthquakes are more in the winter than any other season. That's really interesting. 1715, William Hobbes. A day during the creation was hundreds of times longer than it was today. Man, I got to drink to that. A shar is a day, not a year. A shar was a turning of the stars. Boy, that girl sang that song. It has been in my head ever since. 1718, Emanuel Swedenborg, the man, Christian mystic, proto-scientist extraordinaire. Earth was losing momentum over time, losing energy. Men's lives had shortened. All evidence the earth will die. It's very interesting. 1720, Benoit Mallet. Earth was 2,000 million years old and man was 400,000. I'm sorry. It's supposed to be 400,000 years old. Oh, I can't edit this text right now. It's supposed to be 400,000 years old. So here is the beginnings of uniformitarianism, 1720. Before Darwin, before Charles Lyell, the two that are really uniformitarianism is traced to. Here's the beginnings of scientific uniformitarianism, that nothing really changes in the world rapidly, that catastrophism isn't true, and that all changes are gradual, and that we must judge what we see happening in the ancient world by the evidence of our eyes around us. We must judge it by modern present phenomena, which is so dumb. But that's uniformitarianism. 1724, Edmund Halley, famous for being named for Halley's Comet. Edmund Halley wrote, "A comet struck the earth in ancient times, forcing the sea inward, leaving behind mountains of heaped up sea bottom. When sea receded," this is the origin of fossils. This makes Edmund Halley a heliocentricist. He believes that Earth is rotating around the sun. 1725, Vasily Kadyshev. Don't give me the line. Mammoths were Siberian in origin and dated from a time when the region was warmer. I'm going to say vapor canopy. 1743, Lewis Evans. The Appalachian Mountains in the eastern United States. The Appalachian Mountains were remains of an antediluvian plain that was formed when running waters washed out the earth to form valleys. That's interesting. That's exactly what the Grand Canyon looks like. It's exactly what New Mexico looks like. It's exactly what Arizona looks like. When you're driving down Route 66 and you're driving on Interstate 30 and you're going out there, you literally see, you drive into former ocean beds, and all the plateaus and mountains are flat top and equal elevation. What does that mean? It means at one time all of that was the surface, and now you're driving into what would have been underground in ancient times. Yeah, that's why all those cliffs, all those flat top mesas look that way. That's the old water surface. That's the old land surface. All that water is gone. 1744, Georges Buffon. Earth was old, having developed over 75,000 years. That's highly specific, but it's way shorter than this other guy talking about 2,000 million years old. 75,000 years old. Buffon also wrote that there are no general rules determining the arrangement of the Earth's strata. All that means is that Buffon was confused because the strata isn't uniform around the world. 1754, Pere Calme wrote, fossils are petrified animals and plants scattered over the earth by earthquakes. Pretty close to the truth. Pretty close. 1755, Immanuel Kant. You all know the name. A primeval rotating cloud of gas, a nebula, condensed to form several balls that became planets. Immanuel Kant. There he is right there. You need to stick to philosophy, my brother. 1770. I guess that's Giuseppe Tualdo. 1770. The winter moon might cause an increase in earthquakes. What were they? What data do they have access to? That's our third reference to the moon having an increase that's our third reference to the moon and being winter time, which the world is perihelion. According to the model, the world is closer to the sun, being a period of earthquakes. 1771, William Hamilton. Changes in nature are very slow and uniform. Man, uniformitarianism is being created right now in this chronology, 1771. It's becoming more in vogue. And a lot of creationists, who most of all these guys were creationists as well, most of them were, they're having trouble reconciling creationist perspective and uniformitarian perspective, which is growing. However, almost all of them are catastrophists. 1773. Seriously contemplate. 1773. Andre Bordier seriously contemplated glacial movement and deposits. This is way before Ice Age theory was even born. Ice Age theory is different than glaciation. It's different. Now, glaciation involves alpine regions, the far north, high mountains, not necessarily the poles. 1773, Torbern Bergman. Boulders found a different composition than mountains means that they were carried there by ice. That's glaciation. These boulders would have been called errata. 1775. Giovanni Arduino. Parts of the world have uplifted or sank due to subterranean pressure. It's pretty sophisticated. 1776. William Hamilton. Earthquake activity diminished outward from an epicenter. Here's our first reference, 1776. Right there, you guys know that date, American Independence Declaration. Earthquake activity diminished outward from an epicenter. There it is. That's pretty sophisticated for the time. The earth changed slowly and uniformly. Said something brilliant and then followed it by something stupid. Volcanoes and earthquakes were release valves for magnetic pressure inside the earth. I don't know if it's magnetic pressure, but it's definitely pressure. Volcanoes and earthquakes were release valves. They were releasing internal subsurface pressure. That is genius for the time. 1778. Again, George Buffon returns. This time he says, life appeared after 35,000 years. Continents separated after 65,000 years, and Earth was 75,000 years old. Creation itself was 85,000 years ago. He's pretty specific, old George Buffon. It's the following year, in 1779, he publishes something, and he amends his belief, saying now he believed the Earth was 78,000 years. There's no reason given for shaving off 7,000 years from his previous estimate, but he's pretty sure of himself. The Earth is 78,000 years old. Still a far cry from 2,000 million or 200 million. The other guy said 2,000 million. 1779, Horace Saussure, something like that. He claimed erratics and valleys were the result of diluvian action, flooding, and disagreed with the idea that ice carried all of this to its present positions. So he wasn't convinced of the glaciation. He was thinking floods did all that. 1779, Abraham Werner. The core of the earth is metallic, and ores were deposits from past times of extreme heat and pressure. I'll go with that. 1780, George Tolman. Earth is infinitely old, and mankind is everlasting, but both the earth and man are continually destroyed and rebuilt. That's the simulacrum. The simulacrum, excuse me. There it is. Earth is infinitely old. It's on a reset cycle. And mankind is everlasting. We're immortal. But both the earth and man are continually destroyed. Phoenix phenomenon, Nemesis X, dark satellite. And rebuilt. Because this is a construct. Tomorrow's continents are developing on today's ocean floors. George Tillman. Today... Yeah, that's tomorrow's continents are developing on today's ocean floors. That's Mother Shipton all over again. Yeah. Mankind's new dynasty will be built on ocean beds. 1783, Giovanni Vivenzio. Earthquakes are caused by electricity. I don't know if they are or not, but I'm pretty sure that the observation of lightning right before and after earthquakes is the reason they believe this. 1785. Geological time was endless and ageless uniformity and evolution of the earth. James Hutton, one of the founders of what became uniformitarian thought. James Hutton said, present-day processes must be used to determine what happened in the past. Now, this is the true origin of uniformitarian thought, a poisonous, warped way of viewing reality in complete defiance of the catastrophist model, followed by academics for centuries. 1789. Remember, this is way before Charles Lyell, Elements of Geology, Charles Erasmus Darwin, The Origin of Species. It's way before. 1789. Giuseppe Vanucci. The Rimini earthquake was caused by several days of lightning. So this is just an isolated incident, this observation. 1790, John Hunter. Fossil forms changed very little, and the surrounding rock could be dated to the same age as the fossils. Continents have been covered by seawater, and many land fossils were not on the ocean bottom. That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, 1795. Erasmus Darwin, Zoonomia. This is not Charles Darwin. Erasmus Darwin in 1795 wrote, "Evolution is the result of new characteristics which survived and were carried on." Now, his version of evolution was actually species adaptation. 1801, Jean Lamarck said new species descended from previous ones. 1802, John Playfair, alpine glaciers are what moved boulders, called erratics. 1804, James Parkinson said fossils were the remains of species that lived before the Great Flood destroyed them all. So even as late as 1804, they're still holding on to their biblical creationist viewpoints. 1807, Thomas Young, earthquakes were waves of vibration. 1812, George Cuvier said there was a progression, not necessarily evolutionary, observable in the fossil record. I need to repeat that. 1812, at the end of the New Madrid quakes in North America, George Cuvier said there was a progression, not necessarily evolutionary, observable in the fossil record. The reason this is important, I've shown you evidence in my own presentations, especially concerning the Medusa effect in fossils, that entire species have been wiped out and flash frozen. Animals fighting each other have been flash frozen. How do you fossilize jellyfish? Not one jellyfish, but hundreds of thousands of them. How do you turn to stone an invertebrate, a soft tissue mollusk? How do you turn it to stone when it lives on the ocean bottom? How do you turn to stone a creature, an animal, a fish that's giving birth to another fish? We have hundreds of examples of fish in the middle of swallowing another fish when they were Medusa affected. Turn to stone. I got hundreds of pictures in those videos for you to see. So I'm gonna repeat what he said. George Cuvier, 1812, Cuvier. There was a progression, not necessarily evolutionary, observable in the fossil record. Evolution and natural selection mandate that the fossil records show that more primitive life forms are deeper, and the closer we get to the surface, we have the more advanced modern species. He's saying that this is not observable in the fossil record. He's not the only one to have said that. I have shown in Archaix that whole species just appeared ex nihilo after cataclysms. Oh, I'm going to drop a bomb on you toward the end of this video about fossils. Now, species died out because of catastrophic episodes of quakes, causing flooding of continents and upheavals punctuated by periods of inactivity and growth. I agree with all that. Basically, it's a reset cycle. When species were destroyed, new ones, more advanced, appeared in finished form. 1812, George Cuvier is telling the truth. The fossil record does not show evolution. It does not show a natural progression. It does not show natural selection. It shows evidence of past cataclysms that wiped out species, and followed by the immediate replenishing of the earth of new species which are more advanced, that appear completely in finished form with no evidence of any type of development. Fast forward to 1867. What happened in 1867? The insect famines. I've got a video about it. I show you guys where it was admitted in the United Kingdom. Back then it was England, Cornwall, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, that all the insects had disappeared. All the moths, all the butterflies, all the flies, all the roaches, all the beetles, everything's gone. Centipedes, nobody knew what happened. But they were talking about it openly. And then the construct itself, knowing that there was a problem because human consciousness is addressing it in the newspapers and they're all talking about it, overcorrected. And when it overcorrected, it literally dumped billions of pounds of larvae and different species of insects on London and the rest of rest of England. Ships were almost capsized, all hands on deck to sweep off insects. Rivers of insects were observed from great distances, just falling from blue sky. And it was insects of different species. And some of them, the larvae and the pupas were frozen solid as if they had come from a great height. So what am I saying here? I'm telling you that in Archaix, one of the tenets is that the sky is a hologram that hides something else. And that we have in the historical record biological materials over and over and over descending from the sky to populate the earth. Animal forms have suddenly appeared. Whole new genera have suddenly appeared. Areas of the world that needed seeds and all that suddenly appeared. It wasn't a jet stream and seeds sending it. It's almost as if hidden doors in the sky opened up and just dumped materials that were needed on the surface. It's a construct that self-corrects itself. 1812, when species were destroyed, new ones, more advanced, appeared in finished form. It's a hell of a statement. Welcome to the simulacrum. 1815, Jean-Claude Methery, earthquakes are caused by electricity. Wow. 1815. Samuel Mitchell wrote that a passing comet in 1810 caused several earthquakes and severe snowstorm. That's interesting. 1816, Robert Jameson. Strata has been deposited without interruption throughout time. Uniformitarian thought. 1818, Etienne Saint Hilaire. All of nature is constantly changing and species react to environmental changes. It's important to recognize what is really being said here. Different biospheres create different species, different types of humans, different types of mammals, different types of marsupials, different types of reptiles, different types of amphibians, different types of avians. Maybe even different types of marine and fish. 1819, George Greenough. Earth had been covered by a universal but temporary deluge. Buy that for $1. 1821, J.W. Wilson. Earth's topography had been formed during the creation, or was the result of the Great Flood. But since then, it had changed very little. A catastrophist yielding to uniformitarian thought. That's what this is. J.W. Wilson is a catastrophist who is starting to yield to uniformitarian thought. Peer pressure. 1823, William Buckland. The flood had been worldwide, but that human remains found with extinct species were not themselves pre-flood in origin. This concept gave rise to the Great Flood date, pushed back to 10,000 years. Yeah. Now, in the chronographical material that I've openly shared on my channel shows, without a doubt, from many different species of analysis and many different source materials, that the Great Flood was the month of May, 2239 BC. However, William Buckland here and other authors around this time are starting to push the flood date further back because a new idea has appeared in scientific circles. The new idea is ice ages. But in the scientific circles, the ice ages were after the Great Flood. This is why so many people get the Great Flood date wrong. This is why so many people have dated Atlantis wrong. This is really interesting. We'll get to it in a minute. I'm gonna cite a source that actually tells you exactly what I just said. 1824, Thomas Webster said strata contained alternating layers of marine and freshwater deposits. Strata contain alternating layers of marine and freshwater deposits. That's incredible. Did you guys know that the Black Sea, which is a saltwater body right now, is actually on top of a land surface that is several yards deep of decomposing freshwater lake marine life forms? Bet you didn't know that. The Black Sea is a saltwater body right now, but it used to be freshwater. And underwater archaeology has absolutely proven that the whole bottom is a layer of it's under high pressure, decomposing freshwater lake plants that are all underneath the Black Sea. 1828, Adolphe Brongniart said the local climate of France had once been as hot as the tropics and the earth was cooling down. Take that, global warming. The reason he said that is because in France he uncovered a whole bunch of vapor canopy era creatures. France was hotter, so was the whole world, and very recently. 1829, Andrew Ure. A great convulsion has sank the continent which now lay beneath the Pacific Ocean. We know it did because we studied Nan Modal, Yap, Easter Island, Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, Oceania. All that area is just the highest mountaintops from a formerly buried land surface. Easter Island used to be much bigger. Yeah, we already know that. 1830, Charles Lyell said if conditions of ancient times returned, so might the extinct organism of the time. Guys, this is amazing deduction. This is amazing. If a vapor canopy returns, then the creatures that thrive then would return by adaptations of existing species, meaning there are many amphibians and reptiles and marsupials and mammals and avians and marine life forms and even humans that will change back to what they originally used to look like and their sizes if a vapor canopy returns. Species adaptation has everything to do with biosphere. 1833, Roderick Murchison, fossiliferous Silurian strata revealed that the ancient world was a warmer climate. He's talking about very large reptiles and amphibians that have been found in the fossil record. Now, these have been separated by modern science from megafauna, although they're the same class. They should have never been separated. They belong in the same class as the woolly mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, the giant three-toed sloth, iguana, not the iguanas, but the giant iguanas, iguanodons. They're all the same class. It's all the same period. This is the megafauna period. But you've been lied to. I've been lied to. Our modern scientists have separated the reptiles and the amphibians and started calling them something else to separate them, and then backdated them so many years in the past, completely defying the actual historical record and covering up the fact that we had a vapor canopy period when those creatures really lived. How do we know this? We're going to get to that. We're going to sum up this video with three core facts that put everything into perspective. It's amazing. Charles Babbage, there was molten lava beneath the Earth's crust. 1834, Peter Marion, earthquakes were more frequent in the winter. There it is again. 1835, William Smith. There he is, William Smith. I mentioned him earlier. The other William might not be a Smith. Then again, some of these authors return years later when they've done more research. The Earth developed in stages. Number 1, rocks and no life. Number 2, marine organisms appeared. Number 3, the marine organisms suddenly died out. Number 4, new forms emerged. Number 5, land appeared. Number 6, plants and animals developed. Number 7, the Great Flood. Number 8, ice ages after the Great Flood. Number 9, the present age. So Ice Age was still an embryonic idea. And because vapor canopy was not imagined, it was easy to assume the Great Flood was further back than it actually was. 1837, Louis Agassiz, he's famous in the uniformitarian movement. Evidence suggests alternate creations and destructions and mass extinctions were followed by ice ages. This is very close to the truth. The collapse of vapor canopies creates ice caps. When the moisture falls out of the mesosphere at the polar extremities, that's what happens. That moisture becomes snow, and 2 miles high, it becomes packed. There's no humidity at the poles right now. Therefore, the 2 mile high ice pack couldn't have just slowly developed. It was dumped there. William Buckland, 1837. The surface of the world had changed through time in a series of creative operations. You can't get more clear than that for 1837. 1837, William Buckland literally telling us right here that the scientific evidence that he has compiled and he has concluded is that something is in control of our environment that literally creates biospheres. The surface of the world had changed through time in a series of creative operations. He didn't give it. He's a scientist. He's not going to say God. Something is in control of the environment, and it suddenly explodes with new life forms. They're not developed. They're created. 1840. Again, Louis Agassiz. Europe was populated by elephants and tropical plants before the ice sheet appeared. Louis Agassiz is literally telling you that the elephants, the mammoths, the mastodons, and all that stuff have nothing to do with Ice Age. What you see on TV, Ice Ages, woolly mammoths in the frost and the snow and the caveman attacking them, is absolute, complete fallacy. That world did not exist. We now know by virtue of scientific study on the hair follicles and the skin of frozen mastodons and mammoths that the hair was specifically designed just like the hair of tropical creatures today, for them to release sweat from their glands, and the hair would trap the moisture and cool their bodies. It was designed to cool them, not to keep them warm from external environmental conditions. Just the opposite of what we've been told. So, Europe was populated by elephants and tropical plants before the ice sheets appeared. 1841, Hugh Miller said there was evidence of degeneration in some fossil lines, but none of progression. Do you see how epic that statement is from the scientific community in 1841? What information came across his table? What did he actually go out, observe, and see to put his name, Hugh Miller, on his writings, and to say that there is some evidence of degeneration in the fossil record, but there's no evidence of progression. There's no evolution. There's no natural selection. There's no development. The only thing he can see is some evidence that fossils were degenerating, or the life forms were degenerating before they became extinct. It's the exact opposite of what we've been told. 1842, Roderick Murchison. Glaciers had been active only in mountains and northern lands, and all other effects attributed to ice was actually just flooding. 1857, George Vogler said more earthquakes happened at night. So that's earthquakes at nighttime, earthquakes by the moon, earthquakes in winter. 3 common denominators that increase earthquake frequency: night, winter, and caused by the moon, or movements of the moon. 1858, admitted that the fossil record was incomplete, but blamed it on the immense length of time involved. That's uniformitarianism. He also admitted that nothing was truer than the fact that the Earth had been through repeated destructions. That is Charles Erasmus Darwin. That's him right there, the Voyage of the Beagle, who wrote On the Origin of Species, who is mostly accredited by the common man with the theory of evolution. 1858, Robert Mallet, might be Robert Mallet. Earthquakes happened mostly along the edges of ocean basins. Earthquake researchers out there, we have scientists who have spent a lot of their life studying all these older texts and all these eyewitness reports and historical records. We have it here that earthquakes happen mostly along beaches in the ocean where the ocean meets the continents. Earthquakes happen mostly there. They happen mostly at night. They happen mostly in the winter time, and the earthquake activity can be predicted by movements of the moon. Here's 4 facts. I'm not really interested in earthquakes, but there's 4 facts right there that somebody who does research earthquakes should find a lot of value in. 1850, Raymond Tomasi. Salt domes were caused by volcanic action which heat the waters, thus concentrating the salt in the uplifted dome. Guys, this is the Reichat structure we're talking about here. This man literally understood exactly what salt domes were. I have a video where I know Jimmy Corsetti hates my guts for it. He blocked me on Twitter. But I was commenting on some of his posts trying to steer him in the right direction, man, because he was posting some things about Heliolithic architecture. He didn't know what he was talking about. But Jimmy Corsetti got real famous with his Atlantis theory, Atlantis being the Reichat structure. And he got something like a million subs. He got real famous for a while behind this, but it's shoddy research. It's completely false. The Reichat structure is a geologic phenomenon. It shows that the Sahara Desert and that part of Africa used to be underwater. When it was underwater, high pressure underneath magma was being forced up. The magma was burning the salt water. The salt domes were created because the concentric rings of the Reichat structure are different sized domes made of salt under ocean, high pressure with magma being pushed up over periods of time. It could have been weeks, it could have been months, but multiple domes. It's like a vent under the ocean where magma keeps pushing up at different time periods. Each time period produces a different sized dome. Those concentric rings are the perimeters of the domes after the domes collapse. So it's got a concentric rings, and he called it Atlantis. And other people followed suit and believed that the Reichat structure was Atlantis, even though there are 40 or 50 different facts in Plato's narrative that are listed. And I listed them for you in a PDF showing that, look, if you want to know if something is Atlantis or not, you got to go by these facts. And the Reichat structure does not qualify in any way to be Atlantis. It was just simply a geological phenomenon. Somebody that I disagree with on Atlantis a lot, but who actually nailed it is, oh my God, how can the guy that always, Randall Carlson. Randall Carlson is actually a geologist. I believe he's a geologist, he's a geologist. And he understands too that the Reichat structure is not Atlantis, but it's okay. It's not Atlantis. It's not even it doesn't even qualify. So we covered this information faster than I anticipated. We're not going 4 hours, guys, but we're about to look at some compelling stuff. Let me share my screen again. I want you to see what I'm reading as I'm reading it. So there's a record right here in the video at all times. So I want you to see here that the 1870s, we get to the 1870s here. I want you to understand that the first complete skeletons of dinosaurs were now being excavated in the United States and Belgium in the 1870s, according to the scientists. Now, these were merely gigantic reptiles and amphibians. They weren't dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are fiction. They're just giant reptiles and amphibians of the vapor canopy world. But because uniformitarianism was not the financially backed version of history, the dinosaurs were used to promote the fraudulent theory of the geologic ages of the Jurassic and Cretaceous. This whole model that was built by the uniformitarians going back to Charles Lyell, who was dating rocks. So the uniformitarians had created this timeline where you dated the fossils by the age of the strata, the rocks they were confined in. And if there was any confusion, you could always date the rock by the fossils that were found in it. It's absolutely completely circular, and it doesn't make any sense. You cannot take an unknown and add it to an unknown and then produce something that is known. But this is exactly what uniformitarian science promoted and still promotes today. So the word dinosaur made its literary debut in a long monograph called The Report of British Reptiles, Part 2. In an 1841 issue of the Report of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. It was a single reference, Dinosauria, to these giant reptiles. There was no Tyrannosaurus Rex, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, none of that. It's just giant reptile. It ended up being an iguanodon, which is a gigantic version of an iguana. That's it. Now, in 1873, the term appeared again. That's a long period of time. From 1841 to 1873, nothing in the scientific records for anything about dinosaurs at all. But the term appeared again in The Story of Earth and Man, which is a popular natural history text by Dawson. So it still wasn't a part of the scientific vernacular or parlance. It's just something that appeared. The scientific establishment did not introduce dinosaurs into the uniformitarian model of history until the 1870s, and they only did so by including giant lizards, giant like iguanodons. This was not as prevalent as you might think. As a matter of fact, I did something that you can replicate. I did a Google search, found nothing. So I did a Bing search, Microsoft Bing search engine, found nothing. I was like, what? So I did a ChatGPT search. I found one thing, then I had to research it, and then ChatGPT told me that it was an error. And I'm like, well, you're the one that told me about it. Come to find out, nothing existed. Remember, ChatGPT lies to you. I got 2 videos about that. So I did a Google search, Bing search, ChatGPT, OpenAI search of any scientific books on dinosaurs in the 1850s. I put 19, but it meant in the 1850s. Then I did a search for the 1860s. Then I did a search for the 1870s. Then I did a search for the 1880s. Nothing. Only a couple books about giant fossil reptiles. Dinosaur does not appear in titles or descriptions of any books published in the 1880s. So there was something going on in the 1890s, though, and I cover this in Archaix. It really started heavily after 1902, but in the 1890s, there was a purge of literacy. Libraries were disappearing and being replaced with new libraries that were funded by the Rothschilds, the Carnegies, and the Rockefellers. Tens of thousands of libraries all over the Western world. New libraries, new editions, new books, new encyclopedias, new all that. So in the entire corpus of scientific books from the 1800s, there is no mention of the excavation of any creature we today refer to as a dinosaur. Only some giant reptiles and amphibians, and the paleontologists called them reptiles and amphibians, did not call them dinosaurs. So this is very compelling here, because I'm going through this book, and this book is everything covered by science, what was said as science was developing and all that, and nothing Nothing about these Jurassic, Triassic, Precambrian, these gigantic dinosaurs. It's amazing. So let me show you how amazing this is. Item one right here. So Herodotus, 450 BC, Diodorus Siculus, Strabo and Pliny, all within 100 years of each other, Pliny the Elder, none of these men or any others mentioned the discovery of a dinosaur or a dragon, but they did mention the excavations of tombs, burials, sarcophagi. They mentioned gigantic humans that had been discovered multiple times. One was even discovered, and a Roman emperor commanded that it be reinterred. That's very interesting. Giants are discovered all throughout the historical record. Bodies of giants, the bones are brought up, and they're human. They're humanoid. Nobody discovered any dinosaurs before. Item: megafauna are gigantic life forms. Mammals, marsupials, amphibians, reptiles, avians from a warmer climate period. These were large, but they weren't dinosaurs. Not according to the model that we have. Item: the Medusa effect, when the whole world froze. I have 3 videos on this subject matter. My last one was a compilation of all my data. I showed hundreds of photos of fossils that should not exist, of jellyfish and soft tissue creatures, microorganisms absolutely turned to stone under thousands of feet of water or on mountaintops. Medusa effect is real. The entire world died. I showed life forms on land and sea, dead, frozen solid, frozen in time as they gave birth, as they were fighting, as they were eating each other, all that. Things that it is impossible to petrify. An octopus, I showed one. It's impossible, but it happened. The whole world froze. I believe we live in a construct, and somebody turned the switch off and everything instantly froze. Now, here's the problem with this scenario. Everything that I showed in those photographs, roaches, centipedes, beetles, ants, wasps, flies, cockroaches, crickets, I got pictures of all those. And I can go in my backyard right now and find every one of those creatures sooner or later. Spiders, dragonflies, moths, butterflies, all flash frozen, petrified to stone. I show pictures of those. How is it possible? That we found all these light organisms flash frozen, and we call them fossils today, and every single one of these organisms exist in my backyard, and yet we have to dig deep to get them. We have to find them under rocks. In construction projects, they come up. And yet, since 1890, all of a sudden, dinosaur skeletons are found on the surface all over the world. All of a sudden, dinosaur skeletons are everywhere. But we don't get to see them. We only see the plaster casts. How is it that dinosaurs are on the surface when they date to 65 million years ago, according to the uniformitarians? How is it that museums are full of plaster cast replicas of these fantastic great lizards, thunder lizards, these dinosaurs? All found since the 1890s and just packed filled in all our encyclopedias for the 20th and 21st century. How is it possible that life forms on the surface dating 65 million years ago are on top of fossils of butterflies, roaches, and just regular toads and frogs and tree frogs and turtles and everything that exists in my backyard? I have in fossil form and showed it to you guys. Who's lying? If the fossils in my, if the biological organisms in my backyard are found in fossils that are deeper than the hundreds of millions of year old dinosaurs, then I can only conclude that 2 things. One, these large reptiles and amphibians died after the world was flash frozen. And it had to have been very recent. How do I know it was recent? Because the same damn life forms that are in the fossil record are in my backyard. So somebody's lying. Dinosaurs are either fake and that the museums or plaster casts are absolutely totally bullshit. And for this rabbit hole, you need to go to Eric Dubé. You need to go to somebody more qualified who's done this type of research. I've always ignored it. I never cared until I read this book. And when I read this book, I realized out of all the great scientific thought and all that come about, dinosaurs never appeared anywhere in this book. That right there was problematic for me. So what I'm proposing is that giant reptiles and amphibians are no different than giant aardvarks, giant tree sloths, giant mammals, giant boars, saber-toothed tigers, giant deer, giant bison, all have been found. They're called megafauna. There are giant kangaroos, giant giraffes, giant elephants called mastodons and mammoths. The vapor canopy world was the world of volcanoes. Therefore, giantism explains all of that. Before the vapor canopy world appeared, that world died of flash freezing. But when it flash froze, it flash froze a world very similar to ours. How do I know this? Because every life form that we found in the fossil record exists today. Every life form I showed in the ones that were flash frozen. I'm not talking about just bones in the earth. Dinosaurs are just bones in the earth. How's that possible? 65 million years ago, those bones just stayed there? No, man. It's vapor canopy. It's only 4,000 years ago. So let me exit out of that. Which brings us to this. Let me stop sharing real quick. So for those of you, one of my moderators would please find my last video, which is the compilation on the whole world froze. I can't remember the title of it, but it's the whole world froze. It's the last major video I did where I showed all my fossils and I showed all the pictures. I showed all the stuff. That is the video about how the world just died, the Medusa effect video. Because until you really process this, both cannot be true. I can't have these crickets and centipedes and moths and grasshoppers and spiders and flies in my backyard that are perfectly identical to the ones that are fossilized, that have been found at varying depths all over the world. Both can't be true. And dinosaurs are 65 million years old and found on the surface. They both cannot be true. You cannot collate that material. But you can accept dinosaurs as just giant lizards and amphibians, giant reptiles and amphibians, like iguanodons, like Komodo dragons, like giant boa constrictors, or reptiles and amphibians. Now, the scientific world, they've been real creative because I'm now finding out, like I said, I'm not qualified. This is not my qualification here. But I do know that Eric Dubé has talked about some of this stuff, and I know there's many other researchers equally qualified who have gone down this rabbit hole. I'm only addressing it now because I am providing a data set out of a book by an academic who has provided all the chronology of academic research going all the way back, and the greatest omission that I found in here was dinosaurs. Why haven't we been studying them for centuries? Why all of a sudden? It's because dinosaurs is a uniformitarian cover. It is designed to hide vapor canopy. Ice Age is pushed because it's designed to hide the date of the Great Flood and vapor canopy. Vapor canopies are very important. We recently had one. That's what this chart is about. Let's go look at it. This is why the vapor canopy is important. Let me show one of the two charts that I just showed today. Right here. Why is vapor canopy important? Okay, do you see this black period, this black circle right here? 522 AD. It's amazing. So let's look at it. Let's look at this chart in light of everything you just saw. Let's look at this chart. The first black circle right here is no scientific, cultural, societal development. Why? Because 3895 BC was the Adam and Eve reset. The first 552 years of the pre-flood world was one where people were naked, Adam and Eve, and they're just trying to survive. The second circle, yellow, is when all of a sudden Enoch, urban centers, agriculture, Great Pyramid Complex, the Anuna appear, and everything's good. The Great Pyramid Complex is built, everything's here in the second circle. The third circle was never drawn because this is a devolving. Society is breaking down. It's become a tyranny. The seven kings of the Sumerian king list right here, which ruled for 670 years, which is 241,200 shars. Now, then we have the Great Flood, 2239 BC. What's after the Great Flood? A period of no development right here. No development over 200 years. And then all of a sudden we have great development, cuneiform, Akkadian. We got the Amorites invade the region and bring all kinds of intellectual pursuits. We have the Indo-Iranian advancements of 300 years. This yellow box, 300 years of Indo-Iranian advancements. The Hurrians, the Amuru, all the Aryans right here. The Vedas. This is this text here. Why did it stop? Because 1687 BC stopped the entire world. The Ogygian deluge. The earth was broken. W.J. Perry wrote the book. He said about 1688 BC, every single dynasty in the world collapsed. He didn't know why, but W.T. Wilkins did. I cited Wilkins many times. He said it was the Typhon, and the Ogygian deluge was very similar to the Great Flood, and they were caused by the same phenomenon. He said it was red mud, red rain, and red dust that fell from the sky and buried whole civilizations during earthquakes and volcanoes and flooding. That's why that yellow's there. It peace and development, and then shock, a cataclysm. Look at this. The next 552-year period, after it's over, we have 583 BC, where her book begins with Greek advancement and development in the sciences. 583 BC, look at that yellow right there. Greek advancements for 245 years until they hit this yellow part here, where the Greco-Roman contact actually created civilization static with little advancement in sciences for approximately 860 years. The Roman war machine, the Roman Empire machine spreading out into the provincial system literally impeded further Greek advancement. Here it is. Created stasis. This stasis lasted till 522, which started the great Dark Age that we know, that later became Middle Ages and then a Renaissance period and all that. 522. Let's look up here. 522 started approximately 1,000 years of zero advancements. We now know from historical record that during this period was a 25-year darkness. It may have been longer because the Roman Catholic Church corrupted a bunch of the records. They lied about a bunch of stuff and they created a whole new calendar that we're under today behind this incident. This incident here, we have a problem because we have a dearth of material. We don't have a lot. So let's look at this. 522 AD began the Dark Age. Both Phoenix and Nemesis X appeared for the first time in all history, even over 5,000 years before 5239 BC, beginning of the Archaix timeline, and 5,000 years after, which is 2178, the next Phoenix episode after 2040. So the Roman Church created the modern Anno Domini calendar to hide the 552-year cycle. The church rewrote the records of the Justinian darkness period. This is a total reset. You see that black disc down there? That's 1,000 years of almost zero development. We have historical records that civilization continued, but it was very primitive. We have a lot of wars and conquests and all kinds of things going on during this 1,000 years. We have historical records. We have the Frankish annals, the Anglo-Saxon annals. We have all kinds of material. We have all the Muslim travelogues. We have all that stuff here. However, there's no development. Humanity is stasis. Here's the beauty of it. Independent confirmation of the Phoenix Nemesis reset of the 6th century AD is from the research of My Lunch Break. My Lunch Break's findings on the world census reports and calculations backward from these reports shows clearly that the world's population was near zero in the 6th century AD. The 6th century AD is 522 AD. That's the 6th century. I don't know. I don't know much about My Lunch Break, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. In one of his videos, just using census reports and simple calculations, going back century by century by century, knowing nothing about the Phoenix phenomenon, there's no correlate between my research and his at all. And yet, he pulled out a gem. For whatever reason, he shows that according to the arithmetic and what is known and reported, if we extrapolate backwards, then we find the world is completely depopulated in the 6th century AD. That's exactly what we find in the Phoenix phenomenon as well. And it stayed that way for almost 1,000 years. Population began growing. It was only here at the beginning at 522 that we actually were depopulated to that point where we were almost zero. This is where we started over. And it is the most interesting year in all world history because of everything that happened and because it is the only year in all of world history that these two, let me see if I can find it. I should have another, maybe I don't. I don't have that chart here. Damn it. Damn it, man. Yeah, I do. Somewhere here, I should have it. Look at me. Man, I got charts everywhere. Let's find it. We're gonna have it. Only year in all of world history. Man, I got a lot of charts. Damn it. Oh, I'm there. Yeah, I'm almost there. Here it is. Only year in all world history. It's right there. It's right there. 522. You see the red? That's the red phoenix, and underneath it is the black sphere. That's Nemesis X. The only year in all world history, and even calculating 5,000 years before the historical record and 5,000 years beyond 2178, there is no time in history that Nemesis X and the Phoenix that visited our world in the same year, except 522. And that 522, independent research by My Lunch Break confirms that we had a total systemic reset of the world population and cultures and everything in 522. Right here, the world literally died. It's amazing. So that was that chart. I think I finished with that chart. No, I didn't. I got something else. So after this 1,000 year period, you see this yellow zone. That yellow zone begins with about 1500 to 1860, because beyond 1860, we haven't developed in our concept of the world. We've devolved after 1860. We're now entertaining fantasies and fallacies, but we had a pretty good, for 360 years coming out of that great darkness, for 360 years, we started advancing rapidly, real rapidly, until the uniformitarian lie became so prevalent because of its funding that now the whole world believes in a bullshit version of history. Here's the other chart. Phoenix cycle of 552-year periods show the time periods of the rise and collapse of civilizations from 3895 BC to 2178. This chart is merely showing you the 552-year cycle that was confirmed in 522, which is confirmed by the research of my lunch break, which is confirmed vicariously, inadvertently, by Susan Thompson in this book right here. To me, it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You can screenshot this chart later, the other one. So it's basically this chart all over again. Remember this? This is a simple Phoenix chart showing the 1656-year periods and the 552-year periods, which are 552 times 3 is 1656. This is the history of the world in Phoenix cycles. It's very compelling. And it was here in 522. The Anno Domini reset, Dark Age beguns, when literally the world died. Right here. Okay, move on to here. And remember, this data set that I just shared with you in this video can be combined with this data set to show the exact same thing. This was a very different data set. It comes from a book from 1877 where I showed every single one of those dots you see in that solid black line. These are all the surviving ancient texts and the authors that were still extant in 1877. So in 1877, a guy did a timeline and he showed world history, and here are all the surviving texts. And when you put it in chart form, this is what it shows. It completely lines up perfectly with the Phoenix reset chronology when the world was destroyed. It's amazing. A totally different way of looking at the exact same thing. I think that's it. I think that's my presentation, guys. I kept it under 4 hours. I absolutely kept it under 4 hours. But it really kind of shocked me when it really shocked me when I was going through this book, and it became very apparent that they were looking at phenomena in the 1800s of giant reptiles and giant amphibians and stuff, and declaring that, these were recent, and we recently had a very warm climate. They're absolutely correct. They were absolutely correct. It was by 1870 and 1880, these families, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, and the Rothschilds, decided to fund an alternate fake version of history and then fund the creation of libraries that would put out all new books in the 1890s, and especially 1902 and afterwards. They would flood the Western world with all these new books, with new libraries that were approved, showing this new uniformitarian model, completely doing away with the catastrophist model, which had been the standard scientific model for 2,400 years since the Greeks. This is what we found in this data set. This whole video and this whole data set was provided by the research of Susan Thompson. It's amazing. She had no idea I was going to use her data to show all this, but I did. It's crazy. That's my presentation, guys. This is Archaix 3. This is Archaix 3.0. I told you we're going to go deeper. We're going to show material. We're going to start putting together all the pieces. And somebody gave me a fantastic idea on X, and I think I'm gonna follow through on that. But instead of doing a linear progressive chart in 2 dimensions, someone said, "Hey, Jason, why don't you draw a circle and then put your Phoenix timeline, put the Nemesis X timeline, dark satellite, and world history on a circle chart, and let's see what we find." I think that is a genius idea, and that is my next project. I'll be doing it on a large poster board, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the outer perimeter, this being secular world history as we know it, an inner perimeter being Phoenix phenomenon, a perimeter is going to be Nemesis X from that, another one being dark satellite from there, a Mayan long count. We're going to have multiple rings, and each ring is going to be a calendar, and we're going to see what we see. I think it was a fantastic idea. I wish there was more of me. I could just send that version of me on that project. But yeah, I got to do it. Ever since it's been in my mind, I got to do it. I got to do it. So Virginia Beach is coming up pretty fast, guys. There's gonna be a after we fill the room up, we can't accept any more ticket sales. But yeah, that's that pretty much covers my topic. I need to stop anyway. My stomach's been killing me all day. I ate something I had no business eating. Something's been messing with me today. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. I have no idea what outro I'm going to hit, but you guys know I'm going to hit it. Yeah, that was pretty fun, guys. I appreciate you spending this time with me. I hope you see how valuable this data set is and what it really means, what its implications are, because it's fantastic. It's a fantastic piece of it. There's a lot of vapor canopy information here. They were just on the edge of discovering the vapor canopy when all of a sudden the uniformitarian model just blitzkrieged them. But had not somebody come and funded the hell out of the uniformitarian model, the catastrophists would have eventually come to a very powerful realization that the vapor canopy answers all the mysteries of the ancient world in species adaptation and in geography. So anyway, until next time, guys, we have a podcast tomorrow. I believe Joel of Perceiver. We're going live tomorrow. I believe it's Joel. I believe he's going to be educating us on Castaneda, something I've been kind of interested in lately. But until later, I'll holler at you guys.